Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate, and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Teresa Boughey, MI and FCIPD, and the CEO of award-winning Jungle HR. Teresa works with executive boards and leadership teams during times of change and business transformation. She is an incredibly passionate thought leader and passionate about enabling organizations to create inclusive workplace cultures. Throughout her career, Teresa has gained vast strategic HR experience working with senior level, C-suite individuals from organizations ranging from FTSE 100 and 250 companies through to financial services, the travel industry, private, public sector, and Sunday Times top 100 companies that grew 20% year on year. Teresa is also the UK Female Entrepreneur and Ambassador and member of Women in Enterprise and Women at Work, APPG. Her revolutionary new book, which I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more about today, is called Closing the Gap: 5 Steps to Creating an Inclusive Culture, and it's perfect for any business to be able to become more professional at any stage of their inclusivity journey. You can learn more at www.junglediversity.com. And on that note, welcome to the show, Teresa.
Oh, thank you. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
Well, you completely deserve it. And I'm delighted to share with our listeners a little bit more about your story today and more about what came to firstly make you write the book, but also a little bit about some of the current projects or pieces of work that you're doing at the moment.
Sure. Okay. So a little bit about the book then. So I have over 25 years experience of working with large organizations and their executive boards to help them really think about, how they get the best out of their people and deliver their business, effectively and make sure that they're engaged and that they have their talent and unique difference identified. And so one of the things that I noticed is that organizations do have a desire to create inclusive and engaged workforces. They don't always know how to go about doing it. And certainly within the UK, with the gender pay reporting, again, it's absolutely shone a spotlight on the need to start closing some of these gaps. So some businesses do incredibly well and others, they just do some really sort of piecemeal type activities. And so one thing that I wanted to do was to provide a really simple framework so that, quite frankly, these companies can take inclusion, diversity and belonging off what sometimes is seen the too difficult pile and move it into something that is really, really tangible and actionable for them. So in my book, Closing the Gap, 5 Steps to Creating an Inclusive Culture, here it is. Then what I've done is I've created a really simple methodology, thank you, called Tribe. And it's Tribe 5 because there's 5 stages to it: diversity and inclusion. And each of those letters stands for an acronym that an organisation can and should do in order to close the gap. So some organisations will be further down the journey and they'll be doing some elements really, really well. But others may just need to focus either on some more specifically or others, as I say, it just provides a really clear framework to help them get started. So yes, it can be used, various levels, but it's a framework for businesses to follow.
Fantastic. And can you tell me a little bit more, just going back a few steps? Obviously, you've written this fantastic book, and I love the acronym Tribe because actually I think that's very poignant when it comes to diversity and inclusion, because it's about finding your tribe, it's about finding your people, it's about finding your belonging, all of those kinds of pieces. Before we go on to delve into what the acronym means and maybe some of the other teasers that we can expect for the book. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you came to be where you are today? Because you've had a very interesting journey yourself, pre-becoming CEO, obviously, of Jungle HR. Talk to me a little bit about how you found yourself where you are today, whether that was a premeditated piece.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess if I go right the way back, which wasn't that many years ago, actually, but if I go all the way back, then, I was a teenage mum. And so my daughter is now 29. I have a son who's 11, but I also have now a granddaughter who is 8, or going to be 8 this year. So I'm officially a nana. I'm not a gran. I'm a nana. And I love all of those things. But of course, what it meant for me was my life choices, and arguably they were my life choices, meant that my start very early on was very different. I had a lot of the stereotypical value judgment labels attached to me. And as a consequence, that start in early life was really challenging, both from an educational perspective and also then as I moved and worked up through my career. So, one thing I was really, really keen to do was to ensure that I as a role model for my daughter. And then, that's really stuck with me in terms of being a beacon of possibility for others. Whatever their life choices are, there's always an opportunity to just have your brilliance shine through. And so to say, that for me is a real driving point to ensure that, despite the value judgments that people levy at you, it's about what you choose to do as a consequence with those. So lifelong learning was absolutely imperative for me. I just had to do it differently. And again, climbing that corporate ladder was really important to me as well. I believed, not in an arrogant way, but I believe I had a lot to offer to the corporate world and those that work within it. And I was really keen to do so. But yes, it wasn't without challenges at almost every stage of the journey.
Absolutely. And thanks so much for sharing that. That's so interesting that you started off your pre-corporate career almost as a very young mum. And I think, you're quite right. Whichever aspect of diversity we are talking about, there are always going to be preconceived notions and preconceived connotations that we feel, and certainly I'm sure are in existence, that other people will then put onto us because of our upbringing, because of certain aspects of our life. And simply it is challenging. It does make you feel like you're starting the race a little bit, with a few blocks on you almost. It's harder, it seems a lot easier for others. Talk to me about how you kind of overcame some of those challenges, because, as a young mum who clearly you've been very, very determined, and I think that's really admirable. And I love the fact that you're excusing yourself for saying, oh, it's not arrogant. I think actually a lot more of us, especially women, but not exclusively women, really should be bold and brave about speaking out about how great they are and about how they know they've got things to offer to the world, because hey, if we don't believe in ourselves, then who else is going to do so? So I think it's really great that you are so confident about that. Tell me a little bit more about some of the challenges or some of the kind of preconceived notions that you were dealing with, because I'm sure that many of our listeners have got children or are thinking about having children, or perhaps they are even young mothers or fathers themselves.
Sure. I think one thing I just sort of clarify there is, don't get me wrong, I have at times the most enormous dose of imposter syndrome. It is there. It's never going to go away, but it's something that, as I say, I do absolutely push through on. I think it's fair to say, for me, I was blessed, and it's one of the kind of pillars that I talk about in the tribe methodology, was to have some role models around me. You know, my mum was brilliant. She was a great sort of role model and supported me and was a great cheerleader for me. Again, I think we need to have our cheerleaders around us. And very early on in my career, I was fortunate to have a male ambassador that really recognised the talent that I had. He was the group HR director for a really, really large organisation. And I worked alongside him. So, you know, I sort of fell into, I'm going to say again, a stereotypical role that many women do. So it was an administrative function that I took up in the first instance. But he wanted somebody more than capable of doing his admin, but also kind of progressing within the field of HR. And so I was so blessed at that age that he mentored me. You know, he would absolutely allow me to, you know, sit in on board meetings, and, you know, to really young age, I was exposed to things such as mergers and acquisitions and executive remuneration, and, you know, all of those things that ordinarily you don't get access to until much, much later on in your HR career. Whereas actually I was really blessed to do that. So, you know, I do owe a huge debt of gratitude to Bill for kind of identifying, supporting me with that. And that's definitely one thing I talk about in my book, the importance of having advocates and allies and ambassadors that, you know, are really, really supportive in terms of reaching down and pulling people up and along their journey with them. And again, it's not about less for them, it's about creating more for others in the future. So that was something that was absolutely invaluable for me.
Absolutely. And I completely concur. I think actually the importance of not only having those alliances, but having people that really believe in you and that give you that confidence piece are so, so important. I am a real fundamental believer in the fact that everyone, whether you are in business or not, I think everyone in life should have the ability to access mentors. And I think naturally we do tend to find mentors as we go through our life. You know, certainly people that we look up to, that we want to emulate, that we want to be like. And so it's really nice to hear that you've had some really great people who have helped you along your journey, as I certainly have with mine. For those that are listening in to today's podcast, I wonder, is there any kind of advice that you might be able to give people on how they might go about finding themselves a mentor, or how they could go about navigating the corporate landscape if they are working within a corporate business, how they can find people who will be good, true supporters of their cause and who can really help them shape their career, but also maybe just make them feel listened to, because I think that's a real intrinsic human need that most of us require as well.
Yeah, so I think it's about, again, one of the reasons why I came up with tribe was because, you know, we do build our tribes, and we also need to consider the role that we play as being a member of that tribe, and it will change along the way. So, for instance, when I work a lot with executive boards and leadership teams, I often get them to work with somebody who is different to them, whether it be, you know, different by way of gender or race, or I use a lot of personality profiling tools, for example. And one of my favorites, if I'm allowed to say, is Insights Discovery, and we talk about color energies. And so, you know, again, when I'm working with them, I will encourage them to work with somebody that has an opposite preference to them, so that they can start to experience what it feels like and how they can strengthen their own, you know, kind of leadership capability. I think in terms of developing, again, themselves as individuals, I talk about accessible role models. And what I mean by that is it's great to watch television. It's great to see actors, actresses, you know, look at Twitter and Instagram and all of those things. But the reality is, sadly, we don't all look like those or behave like them. So it's about saying, how do I celebrate the things that I do particularly well? And how do organizations create platforms so that employees start to really recognize the brilliance that each and every one of their employees have? They could do things like an employee recognition scheme. Again, in my book, there's a great case study of an organization that created an employee recognition scheme called SHINE. And each of those acronyms, letters, stood for a particular activity. So they started a process whereby employees nominated their own workforce for brilliant things that they had done to shine. And it was through that people started to recognize, actually, I come to work, I do my job, but I do this particular thing really well, and it's different than someone else can do. It doesn't mean it's better. It just means that that's a great skill set that they have. So, for me, it's a combination of a lot of things that will help build somebody's confidence. Find your cheerleaders, think about the role that you play within your own tribe, ensure that you give as well as take, so you're a radiator, rather than, I don't like the word drain, but, sadly, that's the case sometimes. So think about all of those, and, again, push yourself forward to some things. Don't be afraid to step into some of those opportunities. I know I talked earlier, I honestly have such a big dose of imposter syndrome at times, but, I just have to push through that and go, no, come on, you can do it. So again, it is about being brave, be bold, be you. I think that's my kind of big offer.
I love that. That's a brilliant catchphrase. Be bold, be brave, and be you. I've just written that down there. And there's some brilliant pearls of wisdom that you just shared with us there. I am such a massive advocate for really pushing oneself out of your comfort zone. And it's not always easy. It does take some serious courage and get up and go to push yourself out into what obviously often feels, I should say, like a very vulnerable territory, like the unknown. But do you know what? Like you've said, I think if you don't do it, then you never know. You're never going to learn. There's always, and it's important, I suppose, to remember that leaders who are in these C-suite positions, leaders who are sitting up there on boards, they've had their fair share of hurdles and challenges to get there. It wasn't necessarily a rose petal path that they've skipped along in order to get to those starry heights of being C-suite level. It's not easy, and they probably have got there through not only a lot of hard work, but through a lot of resilience and pushing themselves out there. And, it's funny that you talk about imposter syndrome. It's one of my main pieces also. I recently did a course it was actually for CEOs, and I was there with a lot of listed CEOs, everyone from the likes of Green King through to Carling and these big household names. And I thought, oh God, what on earth am I doing here? And they said, how are you all feeling and what are you fearful of? And I said, I feel imposter syndrome. I feel I'm sitting here with what was actually the majority kind of middle-aged white guys who had 20 years more experience than me. And it was a really, really scary thing. But actually, when you say something like that out loud, actually you find that the vast majority of them are secretly thinking it. They just don't want to say it. So I think it's a very, very natural thing. And I think it often is. Absolutely. I think it's often more prevalent in those leaders who are in very, very, very senior positions, because the higher up they go, the more they're in the spotlight and the less there are of people who are like them. And so it can become quite a lonely place to be. And, especially for yourself as a CEO and founder and author of a book, you've done lots of these wonderful things. You're always sense checking yourself against what you have or haven't done before. And obviously, a brand new book, I'm writing a new book, and so I'm already thinking, oh my God, what have I got to say in a book? But it's like, no, get rid of all that negativity push forward, like you say, and be bold and be brave and be you. So moving on, just to a couple of other questions I have for you, because you've given us some great pieces of learning there that I think all of our listeners can take home and hopefully learn from and use them to inspire throughout their day-to-day lives. But I wondered, what does diversity and inclusion in the broader sense mean to you? Because obviously the show is called Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, and of course you've talked a lot about role models, but what does diverse and inclusive leadership mean to you personally?
So for me, diversity is this sort of demographic mix in each environment, and it's the fuel for innovation. So that for me is kind of what diversity is. And inclusion is really about creating a sense of belonging. It's where people feel respected, they're valued, really within the environment, and they can achieve their true potential. So those things, as I say, are really, really important to me. If you say, diversity and inclusion, it's, as I say, it's the mix, it's the blend, it's the real about valuing the unique differences that we all have.
Perfect. And into a quick lightning round, because I'm conscious of timings here, and I could ask you 1,000,001 other questions today, but I will try and keep myself to the lightning round, of which I'm going to give you 30 seconds to answer each. What are your top tips or your secret to success in business and wider life?
Okay, so top tips would be integrity. So always do your best for yourself and for others. I think help those around you. So be cheerleaders for others. I think I mentioned that earlier. You touched upon it. Greatness is just outside your comfort zone. So push through, be proactive. Find your voice, share your opinion. Sometimes that can be the biggest stretch in terms of speaking up, but that's really important. And never stop learning. Be open to new ideas. You can't always be right. Not that I will ever say that to my husband, but you can always be learning. So those would be my top tips. Yeah, but believe in yourself, be brave, and have fun.
Fantastic. And is there any advice that you would have specifically given to your younger self, to the young Teresa, when you're back there, having had the first little one all those years ago? Well, I say all those years, not that long ago, but years ago, before you kind of embarked on this big time corporate career. Is there anything that you wish you'd done or could have advised yourself?
Well, I guess I'll share some advice that my mum gave to me, actually, which is the kind of my mantra now. And she just said, you can achieve anything you want to if you believe in it enough. And I genuinely feel that that's the case. For me, as I say, I want to leave a mark in this world. I want to leave a legacy. It's bigger than me. And again, that's not because I'm being, sort of brash. I just know that I want to make a difference in the world, and I'm hoping that my book will do so. So those would be my words of wisdom.
I'm absolutely sure that it will, and I can feel your passion radiating off my computer screen. Even though we are not here in person, we are over Zoom video call, but I can feel your passion. I think you're right. If you believe in something, if you can visualize it in your mind, I'm a massive fan of visualization exercises. I really do think you can bring that into the forefront and into reality by really, really making baby steps and big steps and watching the progress. Okay, so finally, are there any favorite heroes or sheroes, books, authors, quotes, anything like that that you would like to leave our listeners and myself with for today?
Yeah, so I recently watched the Brené Brown's Call to Courage talk on Netflix, and I have to say it was incredibly thought-provoking. She just shared with humour, and I'm going to say she was really courageous in terms of her personal story that she shared, but real pearls of wisdom. So if you haven't watched it yet, I really, really would encourage you to do so. It was incredibly thought-provoking. I think the other thing for me that was inspirational was that the audience in there was incredibly diverse. And I guess by that, what I mean is, it wasn't just Brené talking to a room full of women and she wasn't preaching to the converted. There were lots and lots of men in the audience as well, because I truly believe that, men want the same thing as women do, which is why I'm really passionate about inclusion. So as I say, if you haven't watched it, I would honestly encourage you to do so.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for that. I've not watched it yet, so it's going onto my Netflix list, onto my saved items. And, I guess all that's left is for me to kind of give a quick summary of some of the key learnings, Teresa, from today. And thank you very, very much indeed for being on the show with us here at Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. So in summary, for those who are listening at home, I'm sure that you've all picked up many, many pearls of wisdom there from our fantastic session today. Do check out Teresa's book. It sounds fabulous. I'm really looking forward to learning more about the acronym that is TRIBE. I think some of the pieces that came out from today's podcast are certainly the lifelong learning piece. And I think whether you are a listed CEO in a FTSE Fortune type company, or whether you are a graduate starting out on your first days in the corporate workplace, well, really do keep that open mind to embracing lifelong learning, because that is the best way to grow and really develop as a leader. If you're like Teresa and me and you feel imposter syndrome, remember that everyone else around you is probably thinking the same thing. Whether they say it or not, they're probably thinking anyway. So don't worry too much about that. In the meantime, you would be best off finding yourself some really great cheerleaders, as Teresa said, some fabulous role models and real life role models. They don't need to be people who are on the television or people who you think, oh, I'll never get to that point. Firstly, forget about that, out of your mindset. One, you can get to that point if you want to, if you really truly believe it. And two, often role models exist actually much closer to home. It could be, a friend or a family member, or even I was chatting the other day to a big issue guy on the street, and God, he had such an interesting story. I thought, wow, what a brilliant piece of advice that I have for the day. And that's gone into the book. So, role models do exist in all different walks of life. So push through the imposter syndrome, keep pushing to find yourself role models, keep being a strong and confident voice for others, because actually not only can you go find these role models, but actually you might be one yourself. You as a unique individual and human being are you're very unique and personal in your own right. And I'm sure that there are many people out there who do look up to and do aspire to be you. So try and be your best self. And finally, be bold, be brave, be you. I think that's a really fabulous quote to leave today on. So thank you very much, Teresa. You can get hold of Teresa on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to her via Twitter at JungleJane21. Or you can get hold of her via her HR website, www.junglehr.com. I will also put all of this into the show notes at the end of today's episode. So once this is released, and it'll go out on Apple, on Spotify, any of your favorite podcast apps. It's also going to be on our brand new Dial Global, which stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders Global YouTube channel as well. So you can check it out there. All of the links will be in there, all of the quotes and the Netflix show that was mentioned as well. So don't worry if you didn't manage to catch it all for today. Thank you very much, Teresa, for being here with us today. Really, really appreciate it. My name is Leila McKenzie, and you've been listening to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast. Bye for now. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.